Hello, Amber, and how are you doing today?
I'm well, Martin. How about you?
Well, it is spring here in Victoria. It couldn't be more beautiful out there. Easy to remember why we live in paradise. And I wanted to ask you a question today because it is as day of recording. So it's March, end of March, beginning of April, 2026.
Right?
And 2026 has been a year of change.
It has. I would agree with you.
Yes. If we had our Christmas dinner had said, "Hey, could you imagine all of these different things, price at the pump, all this change? This is all coming in the next few weeks." Um, yeah, I probably would have said, "No, there's no way that that's where we're gonna be."
Or you might have said, of course it will be that way because it feels as though that's more true about life is change than not
Yeah,
change.
so beautiful, and I'm glad you went right to change because what I wanted to talk about was change, but change when we are, and I'm gonna use this word, when things may or may not historically have been popular. So when we're doing projects, some of the projects we do, we're like, "Oh, everyone's gonna like this, a new product, a new thing." Um, but as you know, I have another podcast I work with, the Enlightened Military, and we were talking about this is the perfect time for Canada to pick up projects around becoming a nation that builds armaments. And
Hmm.
we are not necessarily a nation historically that builds armaments.
And you are talking to someone who has absolutely no subject matter expertise in this
Well,
area.
so here's where I'll bring it to your expertise, which is the notion of doing something like that will have a different popularity.
Ooh, yes.
And every project has a popular or unpopular stance that you kick off with.
Yes.
So today I want to talk about specifically when you've got a topic that you know will be controversial. Because there are lots of projects, lots of things people are building right now today that someone else was probably pulling the collar of their shirt and their tie going, "What? Today we're going to make a better sex toy?"
Whoa.
Someone did make those and
Yeah.
they were projects,
Yeah.
but were they popular with all around? And what do we do when we have to necessarily look at how is the world going to view the type of project we're working on?
Wow. There's so much complexity here. First of all, thank you for asking that question. Maybe not thank you for asking me. No, I just so in my mind, off the top of my head, I go right to difference. I go right to what makes us different from one another. I speak often about bias, and I very much want to empower individuals that I work with, that I teach, that I am engaging in projects with. Bias is not a bad word. This is not a four-letter bad word. Unfortunately, depending on the environment you find yourself in, it may be seen as a bad word. A lot of human resource departments don't want us to talk about each other's bias. Some actually make it illegal to do so. And the hard part about that is every individual human has bias. You have bias, I have bias. The way we carry our bias can be constructive and it can be destructive. And it can actually probably be both simultaneously because our bias is our own unique metaprogramming, values, beliefs, uh, history, experiences. This all comes together to create what essentially is our unique POV or point of view of the world. That is our bias. And that bias is often what, on an interest holder list in a project environment, we are wanting to capture our interest holders' bias, not to marginalize them, not to take advantage of them, to understand their unique viewpoint, aka bias, so that we have an opportunity to look at the project um, planning environment as well as the project kind of leadership way of working and think of ways to communicate to our interest holders based on what we may already understand their biases, to look for ways for them to view the work we're doing as not negative. So we're looking for opportunities to say, okay, if your viewpoint is X, then this project that we're working on is going to provide or going to create X on this date, and then ultimately maybe the ultimate project delivery. It may be that X is going to get delivered. If you're a key interest holder and you have great power, authority, and influence over the work that we're planning to do, and also the final delivery, whatever that is, how are we going to make you happy? That's essentially what we're trying to do. That doesn't mean that you're going to like what we're making, aka use the example of a sex toy. If you're dealing with an incredibly conservative, very traditional interest holder, perhaps even an interest holder in, for instance, just to use this example and stretch it out, let's say we need to procure a certain type of latex or plastic. And although that certain type of latex or plastic may exist in other places in the world, we're going to use it for something like creating a toy that you yourself, who is the owner of a latex plastics company, may not actually approve of its use in that way. This happens actually a lot. Not that I have experience in this unique sex toy market, but the example being that the use case for procurement, depending on what the project is creating, may or may not completely align with the values of the organization we're procuring from. So in the case of latex and plastic. At the same time, what is the overall bias of that organization? Do they value integrity because they believe the sex toy market is illegal and or not appropriate? Do they value that more than they value the sale? And it's hard for me as a project manager often to admit this, but sometimes it really does come down to what's the fiscal cost of the loss of business or the opportunity for business. And when you can create that, oftentimes you have, it's kind of like putting a pressure test or a stress test on somebody's integrity or bias. Because the person who believes that sex toys are inappropriate, that's actually a bias. It's not, I'm not here to argue, are they good or bad? It's not relevant. They are neither. They can be either, probably, but it's a subjective viewpoint. And because of that subjectivity, as project teams, our work is not to debate that. I'm not going to go 10 rounds with whether this project is good or bad. If I felt that it was bad or it was against my own integrity, I wouldn't have said yes to working on the project. I could have made that decision. Whether that sounds like I come from privilege or not, I really do believe if we have integrity as professionals, we should be making those judgment calls. If you work for an organization that does work that you don't approve of, you should leave. You should not work there. You don't need to let go of your integrity. You just need to recognize that's valuable for you. That's your bias. That's not neither here nor there, good or bad. If that creates toxicity for you, then move on, then go somewhere else. And I think this is also the work of interest holder management or engagement. However, you proposed, how do we, it's kind of like the question is, how do we make sure that people agree with us? I'm not saying you said that. I'm just saying you could go there pretty quickly based on what you proposed. And this is where I'll just be the first to tell you, you can't. So stop trying. Stop trying to convince people. And as a professional, in my novice years, I believed that there was a lot more right and wrong to do in a professional work environment. Right decisions, wrong decisions. Now, what I recognize is regardless of whether I made the right or the wrong decision in the past, that decision has got me here, which means that on the back of a positive or a negative decision, I found myself here. And today, that creates still an opportunity for me to choose. I don't use the filter of bad or good the same because I realize in the past, it becomes irrelevant whether it was bad or good pretty quickly because you just have to keep moving.
Yeah.
And in the case of, like I said, if you have a problem and you don't agree with the sex toy industry, then do not work on a project that's creating a sex toy. Make that judgment call early on. Allow your bias to be a governing force in your own decision making as a professional. And then if you are fine with it, How do you navigate people who disagree? You let it go. People disagree. We don't agree. Can we be respectful? Can we be professional? Can we work together? Can we collaborate? And can we not all carry the same bias? Absolutely. That's it's tough work, but that is redemptive professional work where I don't see the world the way that you see it. But in this situation and this collective environment, we can decide yes, we are going to procure latex and plastic from this company. Yes, in full disclosure, they know what we are doing. And yes, they have agreed under these circumstances, we will receive X amount of this product. And it's not an endorsement necessarily of our project, it's business. And I feel like this is also, I brought the word up endorsement. And I think a lot of times we, depending on your own bias and worldview, you believe that everyone around you in your world must endorse what you're doing. And that's just simply not true. Endorse is not a requirement in order for economy to work. Allowing or just letting go, recognizing that it takes different ways of working to make lots of different things in the world, that's a more professional approach. And in your relationship building with your interest holders, that's what we want to do. And I don't really want ever to be in the business of trying to manipulate or convince an interest holder to like something. Why? What? That's not my job. My job is to put the project outcome first.
Mhm.
And ultimately, in the midst of getting the project delivered to closure and, handoff, I want to conduct myself and support the relationship I have with my interest holders in such a way that we can get to that date. Do I have to have everyone like me? No, and that's a very dangerous way to lead a project. If you are a individual who has really not done the work of understanding to not people please, um, I think that's one of the toughest ways to actually exist as a professional, but definitely as a project professional. Because if we are people pleasers, the project is always second on the list.
So I love your use of the word professional because for me, this is a professional conversation. Um, and it's true in almost every room I've ever been in with a team. I know that not everyone's going to agree. We
Right.
can affirm each other's position, but we don't have to agree on each other's position. And I'm curious, and I bring this up because as you were talking, I was remembering something both of us worked on a while back. And my question kind of revolves around the team charter. Like, can we agree as the team
Mm.
that we're going to move in a direction? And I'm thinking about an engagement you and I both did years ago where we were at the team charter stage of something and someone stood up and went, I completely think this is crap. I don't want to do this. I agreed because everyone else agreed, but I think we're having a waste of time, effort, and money. I'm pretty sure you know the
I'm
space I'm
like,
talking about.
I literally don't recall the exact situation
Okay.
you're giving, but that's okay because I don't think
It's
it
all right.
matters in
Yeah.
this. We don't have to disclose it because
That's fine.
it's
No, we don't need to. But it's that moment when, and again, part of team chartering is getting the clearing of the air, is what I like to call it. The clearing of the because if you are, we could use sex toy or we could use armament. Both of them are going to
either
cause
are
feel.
controversial.
Yeah, that's right. Whether your steel's going to the sex toy or whether your steel's going to the hull of a warship, people are going to have some feelings about that.
And they should.
And yeah,
I just want to take a moment to, I really do believe in empowered individuals making judgment calls based on what they really see and care about in the world. And so, um, I'm not in either of those industries that you mentioned, nor do I have a desire to work in either of those industries. But I also will tell you that I don't carry a very clear bias against either of those industries either. And so if I was presented an opportunity to work alongside, I don't think I would have an integrity issue. That being said, there are many people in my life that would have hard stops in either of those environments. And I respect that. I respect that, for instance, some of the more younger or novice professionals that I work with, they would have a hard stop at having anything to do with military. It's just simply a boundary and a barrier for them. And whether I share it or not, I can very much extend empathy and curiosity towards their decision to not have anything to do with the military, anything to do with war and armament. It's a no go. I, I'm not upset about that for them. I feel as though there are many of us that feel disempowered because it is unpopular to be in a certain side of the conversation. I disagree with that. I think the most empowered position to be in is to just be curious in your own bias and at the same time hold your ground. If you feel passionately about that, then don't work in that environment. Very much on the same side. If, the sex industry, the sex toy industry, like I don't really carry a huge bias there, but I have people in my life who would hard stop, absolutely, never, no way, no how. And whether I think that's a good conscious decision or whether it's just maybe based in fear or lack of awareness, doesn't matter. That's their choice. And I think they, you, any of us should be empowered to carry bias and to make that a governing principle for where we work and where we invest our time and attention. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about we're already doing the armament. We're already making the sex toy. We are the project team. We're in the flow of work and we have interest holders who have bias. And in that environment, that's what I sort of was speaking to, which is it's okay for people to have issues and to not be aligned, but it's also okay for us to expect a level of professionalism in a work environment. And I think for me, who is generally not the project manager running out caring the most about money first, I also know that money really does speak here. And so doing a cost analysis of some of these, decisions to help not force your interest holder to be happy about something, but to give them better context, give them better perspective, and then to just ask them, I respect that this is not something you support. So let's talk about the project, not about you and I having a difference of opinion. And in the project environment, can we make a collaborative decision that benefits the project? That's a very different conversation. That's asking for people's differences to be a part of leveraging for better decision making.
Mhm. So I'd like to we've still got about 10 minutes left, switch the topic here to something that is quite topical today, but everybody's got a feeling and an opinion on, and that's specifically around artificial intelligence.
Okay.
Because in the world of artificial intelligence, let's say you're working on a project that deals with some portion of a language model.
Okay.
You may only know the portion you're working on and not necessarily how it will be integrated into other pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, if you're a sci-fi fan, in the movie Terminator 2 Judgment Day, there's a deleted scene where the person most responsible for creating artificial intelligence is telling his wife, oh, it's going to fly planes that'll never crash. It's going to drive cars that will be completely safe. In the brain, it was all the things that will benefit humanity without any understanding that at some point, this will become the thing that makes the robots killers. AI has this same argument going on today on, is this the thing that's a great tool, or is this the thing that will, I don't know, take it to its extreme, blow the planet up by drilling into the molten core and causing the planet to explode? It's a tool like any other tool. How do we deal with the feelings and the bias around AI?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very big question. It's also a massive shift to where we were talking, I would say, but it's the same. If I think in terms of if I'm in the project environment, if the ultimate project delivery is we're working together to get the thing to project close to hand off, then we're looking at it and we're looking at AI as a tool. And your bias against it, let's say, not that you have that, but in this case, you're against it, I'm for it. But does the project need it?
Mm-hmm.
And as long as the project continues to require, need, or something within it necessitates its use, then I think it is about both of us suspending our I agree, you disagree, and looking for something collaborative based on a very kind of clear set of criteria. So whatever's in the project charter and whatever we've agreed to deliver, then we will use and leverage whatever tools necessary. And your use issues, my use issues will have to be set aside. I think as professionals, we're being asked to do this right now in workplaces. Without going into too much detail, one of the workplaces that I work in has had a very anti AI stand for a long time. And this has been really hard for me. From 2021, since we've had general kind of public access to what is essentially just large language models. This has been something that I've been incredibly curious to use and skill up in. The fact that I continued to be in a professional relationship with an organization that basically banned it until last fall has been very difficult. That power over me to ban it in their work environment did not ban its use in all of my environments, just when I worked with them. And did I agree with that? Absolutely not. In fact, as a change management specialist, I would have always advised them, you're making a big mistake. Have they made a mistake? Definitely. Will they pay the consequences? Yes, and they are paying them now. Because up until just last fall, 2025, they just begun to say, okay, maybe we should look at this. I believe that, maybe they're not too late to the game, but the delay has put them at a disadvantage in the marketplace. But I still work with them, and I have. And during those years where it was very clear that they were anti, I was still leveraging AI in appropriate ways that didn't create conflict for them and or didn't negate my contractual relationship with them. So it's not like I signed on and said, yes, I promise I won't use it either. No. Had they asked me to do that, I would have walked. In fact, in a completely different situation, but a similar scenario, I did just that. About 25 years ago, I was working for an organization, and this organization said, in order for you to continue with us, you must do this. Actually, that wasn't true. It was you must abstain from doing this. And I simply said no. And they said, well, you'll have to leave. And I said, goodbye. And I walked out. And I remember at the time, people in my life and people in that work environment were like, how could you do that? And I said, because I'm very clear about my boundaries. And what they were asking me to do was outside of my boundaries. Did I walk mad? No. Am I upset? No. Did I think it was a short-sighted, request on their part? Of course I did. But it's still theirs to make. And I walked out and moved on. Um, that sounds very bold. It actually sounds very feisty to do. What I would say in this conversation, whether we're talking about AI or armament or sex toys, the point here is individuals have every right to be empowered in their bias to make decisions. But remember, when you do, there will be consequences to that. So in the case of my, example 25 years ago, what was the consequence? I lost my job. I didn't have work. That's a huge consequence. But for me, I knew what I was being asked to refrain from was outside of my overall character. It's interesting because what they asked me to not do, I still to this day I would never, yeah, I still hold that same thing. Now, I think they were asking something inappropriate, but legally inappropriate, possibly, but I wasn't interested in the fight. So I just moved on. We as individuals need to feel and flex our bias. Well, I think let's not be afraid of it. The way you were raised, the way you grew up in Hamilton, Ontario, you're ex-military. Your point of view is so different than mine. And yet, there are still ways that we can meet and discuss and talk about things. It's not about sameness. It's about difference and how we leverage the difference. And I think particularly in project environments, as soon as we join the same side of the kind of project environment and make the project the center. So what's good for that? Subjectively, we can bring our bias and collectively talk about, well, I see it this way, you see it this way. Okay, but what makes the project the best? It's just like a safe way to leverage the fact that we don't agree, but we can collaborate together. And, it's actually a very In theory, it's an anti-war sentiment too in a professional environment, because the idea is, do we have to fight each other? Or is there another way? And I think obviously on a global scale, there isn't another way in some cases. I don't like that, but it is what it is. You obviously, you've been in many wars in your professional career. And although you're not in the military anymore, being a veteran puts you at a very different advantage or vantage point when you see what's going on in the world. I don't have that experience, but from a project standpoint, I very much can understand that, what we need to accomplish sometimes means we do have to compromise our values. Well, hopefully not values, but definitely make decisions that would be outside of what we would make on our own, but we're doing it because we are collaborating with other people. And those other people see the world differently. And that perspective gives us a broader scale of detail. And the more curiosity we can have about all of those details, I really do think the decision making can be better. It's harder.
Yeah.
You don't kind of snap your fingers and find the right way. And I think this is also where you have to let right and wrong go. You have to think, okay, well, what's based on the context and the situation? What feels as though we are bringing wisdom. And that you'll hear me say this. I don't say best practice a lot anymore. I say wise practice. I talk about wisdom. I don't talk about right and wrong. I talk about what's the subjective wisdom right now in the room. And so we're not looking for the right way. We're looking for the wise way.
Mhm. And I'm hearing, I'll paraphrase what I hear. I'm hearing that curiosity and professional focus on project success are two ways to employ wisdom
Yes.
when we have a difference.
Mhm. I think so. I know so.
Okay. Well, I want to say thank you for today's conversation. I don't know if today's conversation will be popular or not, but then it's not supposed to be.
Well, if we title it Sex Toys in Projects, it might get some popularity.
Well, all right. And on that note, I'll say until next time.
Thanks, Mark.